Since this is the first time we're looking at flow in this session, let's take a little tour of the home page. And one of the things you'll want to know most about as you're just getting started is this Learn tab at the bottom. So I'm going to click on Learn. It's going to pop up the Microsoft Flow documentation. And here you can see it's broken out by level. As a beginner, it'll walk you through a lot of the basics of building your first flow. And in a few minutes, you'll be sending approvals, sending tweets, sending emails. As an admin or an expert, you'll get more detailed descriptions on how to use the flow's governance features and the monitoring features as well. And while you're here, don't hesitate to ask questions of the flow community. It gets used. I'm always surprised at how often I'll Google for an answer and the top answers always point back to this community. So don't hesitate to go in there as well. So now let's move into the editor. So it's going to start off with a search block here, and that's going to search through all the 250 plus connectors and all of the actions that are tied to them. It'll also search through the templates, so the combinations of these that are used to perform common tasks. And these templates are grouped in these categories by job role as well. So for software development, HR, personnel, that sort of thing. So we're going to start with a pretty basic scenario. We're going to do an approval off of a SharePoint document library. And this is one of the things that I found most useful to government customers. I've spent years talking with government clients about how to automate their work processes, and too many are still stuck in folders and paper, or at best email. So we're going to take this document library here, and we're going to make it so that when a document's dropped in there, it goes to an approver, and then we capture the approval action. This is just an out-of-the-box document library. I've added two columns, one for comments and one for the approval action, approve, reject, or inapproval. So here from this document library, we'll create a new flow. On the right-hand side, you'll see some of the common templates that apply to a SharePoint library. And if I click on See More Templates at the bottom, it'll take us to then a SharePoint-based view of the templates. The one we want is this first one here, Start an Approval when a new item is added. So what it's going to do is it's going to connect to Outlook so it can send emails, connect to SharePoint, and connect to approvals. And then we can see here the template, start when a new item is created. So it's going to trigger when a new item is added to SharePoint, and it's going to start an approval. Once we get the response from the approver, if it's approved, we're going to go down the left side of this condition. If it's a reject, we're going to go down the right-hand side. Either way, it'll notify whoever uploaded the document of the status of their approval. So let's start by filling in at the top. And so we'll enter in a custom value here for the site address. Let me just take this here. My site is Ignite, and my document library is called Approvals. So we'll put those in here. And then we'll assign this to someone. Now you can pick the created by email, although it'd be weird for me to approve my own document. You can also use the Office 365 reporting chain so that you could pull the person's manager and send it to the manager. In this case, we're just going to send everyone to the same person. We're going to go to Betty Bosswoman. And then once we get her approval, we're going to notify me that she's approved or that she's rejected. So let's save this and then put it in test mode. Now in test mode, you can trigger the action, and then after you've triggered it once or multiple times, it'll capture some of your old runs so that if you get a failure, you can go back and try to fix it and rerun that exact scenario and troubleshoot as well. So in this case, I'm going to perform the trigger action. And then in a moment here, the flow is going to connect to that SharePoint site, and it's going to start watching for the document that we're going to drop in, and then it'll run the flow. So I'm going to go back to the document library here, and I'm going to drop in a new document, a picture of a kitten. So now if we come back to our flow, we should see that it started here. So it found the item created in SharePoint, and in a moment it's going to start the approval. And now the approval is waiting. And so now it's queued up for Betty Bosswoman to approve it. And behind each of these is the detail of the actual run. And so you can see all the data that was passed in and out of that particular block. And so now if we come over as Betty Bosswoman, we can see that she's got a new email here with a link into the content. I can click approve, put in comments if I want, and then hit submit. We come back to our flow. We can see that collected the approval, then went to the condition. It found that it was equal to approve, and then sent an email back to me saying that this was approved. So now let's capture those approvals and the comments here in these custom columns that I added. So one for comments and one for approval. And we can do that by adding a new action to our flow to update SharePoint following the approval. So we'll add an action. As we add an action here, we can search here, or we can go by the connector here. We're connected to SharePoint. So we'll click SharePoint, and it's going to show us all the actions for the SharePoint connector. We want this last one, update item. So here again, then, we'll put in our site address and our document library name. And now it wants the ID of the item to be updated. Now it wants the ID of the item to be updated. And so here in the dynamic content pane on the right is data from above us in the flow that fits this. And so here it knows it's looking for the ID of a SharePoint content item, and so it's filtered it down for just the one relevant item. So we'll put in that ID there. And then we can set the comments here, and so it's filtered us out to strings, and we can see everything from the approval and from SharePoint here that could be used. We want the approver comments, and they're right here from the approval block. And then we want the approval action. We can see the options that are available in SharePoint, but we want to enter whatever the approver did. That's the response to the approval. So now when we save this, we should get an approval back into SharePoint. So let's update a few more documents here. So we've got a few more. They're all in approval. And so we should see now as we go into our approver that we've got additional emails that we can respond to. Approvers can also go in here into the approval web page and see everything waiting on their approval. So I can approve here as well. And I can also go into the mobile device here, the mobile app for Flow, and approve from there as well. So here in Flow are everything that we were just looking at on the web page here, and I can process one of these. I can even click in and view it, and when I'm done, I'll just click approve. I can put in comments here. And click confirm. And one of the nice things about this then is this gives approvers one place to look for all of their approvals, because this doesn't have to just come from SharePoint, it can come from any of your systems. Use the same approval engine to do different approvals, but approvers go into one place and they can do it on the web, in email, and on a mobile device.